What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Man in the House. Today's show is a special show. Yes, it's special because I'm giving away 2 kids. If you need kids, I can drop them off at your house. Don't even think about it. Look, I'm giving away kids for free, just like you drop off clothes at the Goodwill. Y'all know what I'm talking about. You ever had them days where you just fed up completely with your kids? You just gotta give them to somebody. This is that day. I'm giving my kids to you all. Who wants them? I'm taking the highest bidder right now. Let me know how it goes. Alright, I'm joking, y'all. For real. For real. No, today's video is talking about how to raise your kids, how to raise successful kids. But before I get into that, I'm gonna take a quick break. Let's get this intro.
Come round and nothing can break. You can't break me down. I got gas in the tank. I got money in the bank. I got news for you, baby. You're looking at me.
Alright, I'm back, everybody. Look, I know if you have kids, you've experienced this feeling that I'm about to talk about. And that is when you go through that whole pregnant phase. I'm a man, so I'm gonna talk in the reference of a man, but when you go through that whole pregnant phase with your wife, you're excited, you don't really know what to expect, but you are just anxious and wondering. And when you bring that bundle of joy home, you realize something very quickly. You are ill-equipped and unprepared to be a parent. If that's you, I completely understand. Been there, done that, and probably could write a book about it, because everybody experiences the same thing. No matter what, you may think that you see parents that are fantastic, that are on top of it, that know every detail about everything. Guess what? They didn't start out that way, and neither did I as a father. I didn't start out that way either. So today's video, I want to talk to you a little bit about, you know, raising successful kids, motivating your kids, and really managing through some of the difficulties that can be parenting. So first up, I'm gonna tell y'all right out the gate, we ain't raising no quitters over here. I don't know about y'all, but we not raising no quitters. And I don't think you want to raise a quitting kid either. You want your kids to be successful. You want your kids to be highly motivated internally. So, and what I mean by that is you want your kids to be self-motivated, ambitious, outgoing, and dreamers, and ones that, you know, that are leaders and not followers, right? And there's a way that you promote that within your child. Yeah, some things are just ingrained, built in. That's just the way they are. That's their nature. But there's some other things that you can do to kind of promote that along the way. And so we'll talk about that. I'm also going to talk about some pitfalls, some things to avoid as a parent, because we are all human and we all get into this situation as parents all the time. And it's hard sometimes because you love your children so much to parent them in a way that is firm, right? Because you got them little cute faces looking at you. When them cute faces are looking at you with them eyes that look just like, you know, them little sad puppy dog eyes, and they're giving you the little, you know, whimpering, you know, cry and all that other stuff, it just makes you melt. But you gotta stay strong, parents. If you don't stay strong, your kids are gonna come out and they're gonna think that they're entitled to everything, and they're gonna think that they can throw a tantrum and it's just gonna be all over, and you're gonna give them what they want. And so I want you to take some pointers from this video. Don't be like that. Don't be the parent in the grocery store whose kid is laid out on the ground, kicking and screaming with their arms flailing everywhere. That is one of my huge pet peeves, y'all, to see that, because it's just crazy. And kids do that. They will test you, they will try you, they are trying their limits. It's normal, right? So you gotta be firm, you gotta be strong. And listen, these things that I'm talking to you about, I learned over years. And one of the things that's gonna come up with your kids, if you have multiple kids and they're, you know, anywhere spaced apart, is the fact that you're different with the second and the third and the fourth child than you are with the first child in a couple of ways. First off, the first child, you're like, you know, cuddling and coddling and all that stuff, but you're also a lot harder on the first child, just because You don't want them to get in any trouble, hurt themselves, and you really you're trying your hand. You don't know. You're not perfect at this parenting thing yet. And so what you're doing is just kind of like, okay, let me try this. Let me see if this works. It is a huge social experiment to have kids, because it's not like, I mean, okay, yeah, your parents, if your parents are involved in helping you to learn how to parent your child, great, but sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes you by yourself. I know ladies, y'all by yourself sometimes. Fellas, you by yourself sometimes. You don't know what you need to do to be a good parent, to groom them right, to cause them to be successful. So I'm gonna talk about a few things in this video that I hope will be some good tips that you can take away. I'm not an expert. I'm not, I'm just a parent. I'm a parent like you guys. And my wife and I have gone through just some ups and downs in the parenting that I'm gonna share with you today. And like I said, just hope it helps you, and you get somewhere. You get something out of this. And if it don't, I'm not gonna take your kids. That's not gonna happen. Y'all be all right. You get through it. No, here we go. So first off, just when you're working with your children, always model the success that you want them to be, right? So you can't tell your kids that you want them to be something that you're not actively trying to do yourself or to model before them yourself, right? So if you want your kids to be hardworking and successful and motivated and driven, you should also be hardworking and successful and motivated and driven, because they're going to look at what you do more so than what you say. And so therefore, you gotta have your game together. You gotta be on top of your stuff. If you're not on top of your stuff, guess what? They're gonna hear what you're saying, but when they get old enough, they're gonna be calling you on your stuff, right? I know those of y'all that have teenagers out there, I know it's gonna happen once or twice. You done said something to them and they clap back and say something back to you, and you really be like, kind of got a point there, you know what I mean? So I'm telling you right out the gate, if you want your kids to be something, do something, make sure you're modeling that thing before them on a daily basis. If it's hard work, make sure you're showing them hard work. Don't get me wrong, I got teenagers, that don't mean they're gonna do the hard work that you're modeling. It doesn't mean that. But at least you set the standard, you set the bar for them to reach toward, right? So one of the things that's big in our family is schooling, education, college. We're big on that. We realize though that over the years, college is not for everybody. You gotta know which kid is for that and which kid is not, and a lot of times it's a mix. You may have multiple children, some of them are good at that and some of them are not. Don't discount your child because they're not on that plan to go to college or they don't want to go to college. I would strongly encourage them to do so, just like we do in this family. But you got to realize too that there's some very successful people in life that have never gone to college. They completed their high school career, they learned a trade, they did something, or maybe they got famous some kind of way and they're able to provide for their family and make money. Don't discount that, because there's a lot of ambition inside of children that are like that, and maybe their goals and their ambition isn't to go through 4 or 5 years of college and come out in debt or whatever the case may be. You just got to know your children. But that being said, model that hard work ethic, that strong work ethic in front of them, because when you're telling them this is how life is gonna be and nobody's gonna give you any handouts and nobody's gonna let you slack off and get away with it, and they're gonna tell you you're not entitled to this or to that, when you're modeling that hard work and that strong work ethic before them, they can't come back and say, well, you don't do anything. But if you lazy, you sitting on the couch, you watching TV, guess what? You're gonna produce a kid that might be the exact same way, or they may look at you and say, I'm never gonna be like that. Either way, it's not a good situation, right? I know that as parents, we always want our kids to do better than we do, to be better than we are, to be more successful than we are, no matter how successful we are, right? So just motivate. That's the first key. First is model the behaviors and the beliefs that you're trying to teach your children. Be a role model to them. Make sure that you set the bar, that you set the standard for them to follow. That's number one. Number two is figure out the best ways to discipline your children. You may start off one way in disciplining, and discipline highly is dependent upon the type of child you have, right? A lot of times what works as discipline for one child don't work as discipline for another. Case in point, my kids are different. When my oldest was younger, he loved to play with toys. He loved to play with, you know, game boxes and all of that kind of stuff. My youngest wasn't like that. He wasn't a toy kind of kid. So to take away an Xbox or a phone, especially from my oldest boy, worked. But to take away an Xbox from my youngest boy, he could care less, right? So you gotta learn and understand, really kind of, you know, just stay and get in tune with their mind and how they function and what's important to them, so you know what to take away from them when it's time for you to do the disciplinary action, right? Everybody disciplines differently. The only thing I'm gonna say to you on discipline is be consistent with your discipline. If you say, you know, you're gonna be on punishment for 3 days, stay with it. It's hard, we know. Discipline is sometimes inconvenient for us as parents. Kids don't really realize that, but it is. You know, even if I take a phone from my kid as a disciplinary action, then I can't call him. Then I don't know where he's at. You know what I'm saying? So, well, I know where he's at because then he'd be on punishment, so he wouldn't be going anywhere. But when I need to get a hold of him for something else, I've taken his mode of communication away. So it is kind of hard both ways, but stick to your guns. Make sure you're consistent on whatever the punishment is, and don't yield to it. If you said it was a week, stay with the week. Ain't no time off for good behavior. I know we all do it. We all give in, but don't give in. Don't give in. Set something that's fair and realistic as a punishment timeline up front, and then stick to it. Don't be putting your kids on punishment for a month. That's ridiculous. But you know what? People do it. People do it. I know things can get bad. They can do some really bad stuff. But at some point, I mean, you gotta cut it off. You gotta figure out when they've learned their lesson. I think month might be too long, y'all. Just saying. All right, so here's some pitfalls, some things to avoid. All right, I said it at the outset of this video. Don't let your kids fall out anywhere. I don't care if it's the grocery store, at your house, or wherever, in church. Don't let your kids fall out and lay there and scream and kick and all that stuff. Don't let that go on, because that's going to continue on into, you know, middle school, high school, adulthood. That's gonna be their mode of getting their way, is I'm gonna throw a temper tantrum so I can get my way. That's not how life works, and people will straight cut you off if they figure out that's all you do is every time you need something, you want something, you throw a tantrum. That's childish. You gotta teach them they own they need to be responsible for their actions, even at a young age. And you know what? This stuff happens when you're 2 and 3. Typically, but you got kids as much older than that throwing tantrums, and that to me is lunacy. So don't let your kids throw tantrums without a consequence. Don't let them just yell and kick and scream in the store. I know some of y'all probably look at it like, well, I'll just leave them there on the floor and walk away. Nowadays they'll call CPS on you. They'll call them with the quickness, or with the quickness on you, and you can't do a whole lot of things that you used to be able to do when we were younger, or if you grew up in my generation. Boy, you got the hands you don't put on you. You know, you got slapped in the aisle at the grocery store. You know, we got all that stuff done to it. We are different people because of it. This generation that's coming up is just really like, I don't know. You can't say nothing to them sideways. They don't know how to handle it. I ain't gonna get into all that, y'all. This is about children, so I'm not gonna get into how these people be acting sometimes. But look, disobedience should have some stiff consequences, and consequences that you stick to. That's it. Don't be too light on them, but also don't be too heavy on them. Pick something that's gonna be appropriate. You know, when you have toddlers, I think they say the timeout session for a toddler should be about half their age. Baby, is that right? Like if they're 2-year-old, the timeout session should be like a minute. Is that how it goes? Yeah. So, She taught kids for a long time, y'all, so that's why I ask it. Yeah, so stuff like that, make sure it's appropriate, it's age appropriate, whatever the consequence is, but also make sure it's something that they're going to learn from. Not to just, oh, I'm just gonna take my punishment, I'm gonna sit in the corner. No, make sure it's something that, whatever it is that you take away from them as a punishment, that is something that they learn from, that it's a long enough period of time for them to miss it, for them to be impacted by whatever it is that you use as a consequence for their action. And then after you've done that, and this is something I had to learn, after you've done that, go sit down with them, have that conversation about what choices could have been made differently, so that they not only understand the consequence and the punishment, but also where there was other opportunities for them to make different choices that would have had a better outcome for them. So make sure you balance the negative consequence with a positive, motivating conversation about how they can do things different. So that's a big key. And then, you know, don't be afraid of your kids. A lot of times I see parents, they don't want to do nothing, they're afraid. Don't be afraid of your kids. Whether they're 3 years old or 30 years old, don't be afraid of your kids. You gotta be firm, you gotta let them know what's right and what's wrong, because they don't know. A lot of times they just don't know. Even when they've gotten to the place where they're in their teenage years and they think that they know everything, they really don't know. So don't just let them go off and say, oh, well, you said you knew it, so I'm gonna let you do it. Because, you know, sometimes I do that. I'd be like, look, you think you know everything? Here you go, I'm gonna do it. And then when they mess up, you wanna say, I told you so. That's not the right way to do it. I know some of y'all do that. I have done that. But that's not the right way to handle it. Make sure when you're disciplining your children, or when you're handling those types of situations, that you have that coaching moment with them when it does go wrong. Okay? You might say, I'm gonna let you do you, but then when it don't go right, have that coaching moment with them. Tell them what they should have done, opportunities that they could have made, that they could have done differently. Make sure you have that conversation with them so they learn from it. Don't bribe your kids. Bribery doesn't work, right? It may work, you may think it works for some period of time. Bribery never works with kids. And one of the things that you should not do is project your inability or your deficiencies as a parent onto your kids by trying to bribe them. You may have some things personally going on in your life as an adult that has an impact on your kids, right? Just because you have that going on and you feel bad about the fact that you may be, you know, going through some things personally in your life, whether it's, you know, maybe you're dating, you got some stuff going on, you neglected them, or you got off on drugs or whatever. People go through things all the time. But just because you go through things doesn't mean it's okay for you to give your kids gifts in exchange for the love that you owed to them. Okay, that doesn't work. You have to figure out how to manage your situation personally, get through that. But while you're figuring that all out personally, you still have to be a parent. You still have to stand up and be a father and be a mother and be in that situation with your children and mentor them and grow them even while you going through. Listen, we all do it on a daily basis. You may be going through personally, but you don't take it to work and tell everybody about your stuff. And if you do, please stop doing that, because nobody wants to know all that detail, right? But you can't just stop. I like that commercial where the guy gets sick, or I think it was the mom that gets sick. You can't take a sick day when you're a parent. You sick, yes, but you still have to be a parent. It's no different than when you're going through things personally in your life and you're not able to, you know, quickly fix these things. Maybe they're things that, you know, you've been working on for a long time. Go ahead, take the time to work on them. But don't stop being a mama. Don't stop being a father, because you can't stop. And that's where some of the pressure comes in. We all know we can't stop being fathers and mothers for a brief moment to get our act together. We gotta learn how to do it at the same time. We gotta get our act together while we being a father, while we being a mother, because guess what? Time is the one thing that you can't get back once it's spent. And when you lose that time with your kids, you can't get it back. You can't get those childhood years back. You can't get those times where memories could have been made back. You can't get those, you know, the prom dates and the homecomings. You can't get those baseball and football games back that you miss. So take the time to be in the moment with your kids, because those moments are fleeting and passing, and you won't get to do them over. So I say this to you today: make sure that you are intimately involved in your children's life, whether that is homework every night, going to parent-teacher conferences, showing up at the games, reading a book to them at night, whatever the case may be. Make sure you are involved in your children's life from top to bottom. Doesn't mean you're gonna rule every moment, everything that's about them. Yes, they're gonna be growing, they're gonna be maturing, and you're gonna let them do some things on their own, but you keep a watchful eye. You know, my grandmother, my mom used to tell me, my grandmother used to always say she had eyes in the back of her head and she could hear from extremely far away. And that's how you have to be as a parent. You almost have to have eyes all in the back of your head and have that owl's neck to be able to turn however 270 or however many degrees an hour owl can turn their neck. You got to be watchful at all times, because your kids will, you know, kids be trying you. They be sneaky. They be trying to do stuff and just to see if they can push their boundary and see how far they can get with you. So make sure you're watchful and that you know what's going on in your kid's life. Look, I'm a proponent of privacy when it comes to your children. I understand and agree with privacy to a degree. But if you are living in my house and I'm paying all of your bills, there's a certain amount of privacy you're not gonna get, right? If I want to come in your room, I'm gonna come in your room. I may not knock, but I'm gonna come in your room. It's my house, right? I don't go through my kids' phones and all that other stuff. I don't do all that stuff. I don't have the time to do all that stuff. But if they give me the reason to do it, then I'm definitely gonna be doing it. And I would say try to have as many conversations about friends and about involvement on the internet with your kids. If you are tech savvy, put in some parental controls on your Wi-Fi network, on your internet, on your TV. Definitely don't let your TV babysit your kids. That's a definite no-no. And remember this: readers are leaders. Turn the TV off. Give your kids some books. If you started it early when they were young and you started reading to them, and then you gave them their first book and you continued them on that path of reading books, they will be fascinated more so in the book than they will be in the TV. But if you let your kids just watch TV all day and all night, guess what? They're not gonna wanna pick up a book because it's instant. You don't have to imagine what you see already, right? When I was a child, I wasn't like that. If I picked up a book and I read it, I thought the book was more interesting than the movie, because your imagination is great and awesome, especially when you're a child. So motivate your children to read, because in the end, readers become leaders because they have the ability to understand, comprehend, they've read the facts and they're not just talking. And when you have the discipline to read, to sit down, to quiet your mind, you can think better. And as you're thinking, you think about new ideas, new ways to do things. And when you start innovating in your mind and you start doing things differently than what you've seen on TV, because maybe you haven't seen it, maybe you are imagining for yourself. And when you're imagining for yourself as a child, you think differently than the world. And if you allow yourself to step out and be motivated by your parents and be encouraged by your parents to do better and to do those things that you imagine, guess what? That's where you get Apple from, and that's where you get Facebook from. All these things that are totally different outside of the box that we currently always think in. So always do that. Read to your children, but foster that reading mentality in your children, because readers become leaders. One of the other things, pitfalls for if you have multiple children, don't ever highlight one child over another. This is one of the things you learn over the years with your children. Don't say, well, so-and-so does this better than you do, because what it does is it makes the other child feel like they can't do nothing right. And that's not the appropriate way to handle things when you have multiple children. Encourage the children in different ways. One child may be good at one thing, encourage them in that thing that they are good at, and help them with the things that they're not. And do the same for the other child. But don't put your kids against each other, because it breeds animosity between them. You may be out of the picture, but they feel a certain way about each other because they're the child that got all the attention or the love or perceived to get that. But in reality, that maybe wasn't your intention. It's just the way that things happen. So I'll tell you, don't do that. Don't put your kids against each other. Don't say Johnny did this and but Sue doesn't do that. She's more the mature one and you act like a baby. Don't do that. Manage your children individually. Encourage them in the areas that they need to be encouraged, and help them in the areas that they need help. Always affirm your children, especially when they're lost. Children do get lost sometimes. They don't know where to go. They're growing up. They're learning new things every day. Their peers are showing them new things. The internet and social media is opening up a whole new world for them. Depending on when you allow your children to get access to that stuff, that's when you're gonna really have to start managing that funnel, managing, what comes into their eyes and their ears, what they're reading, what they're seeing, all of those types of things. And when you're doing that, make sure that when you see that they're lost, make sure you're the one that's giving them that direction, that you're the one that's affirming who they are and their ambition and their personality, because you don't want someone else to be in that role for you, because that will lead them to places that you may not as a parent want them to go. So make sure that you're encouraging them and affirming them to be strong in who they are and follow after the beliefs that you've taught them, versus allowing other people to be that filter for them or to be that influence over them. Just make sure that, like I said, you're active, you're involved, and that you're encouraging and affirming them in the right ways. Practice what you preach. I talked about that in the beginning. If you say you're gonna do something, do it, and vice versa. Because they key off, it's like monkey see, monkey do. Not calling anybody monkeys, but just y'all know what the saying means. And if you don't, it just means this: your children will do what they see you do. You can tell them not to do something, but they're gonna do it because they see you do it, and because they don't see the consequences. Now, a lot of times, if you are if you're abusing substances or something like that, and children live through that, they see what happens to you and they don't want to be in that situation. But sometimes, even though they see that, they still end up in that same situation too. So be careful to practice what you preach. And the last thing, some of you may agree or disagree about, but the last thing is this: be hard on your children. Yes, I said it. Be hard on your children, because for two reasons. One, if you're not hard on them, the world will be hard on them and they'll be unprepared for it. If you're hard on them, at least you're hard on them with love, the love that a parent has for their child. When the world's hard on them, it's not by love, it's just by being hard. And so therefore, I'm saying be hard on them, but balance that hardness with love. And when you are hard on them, know that they're in that moment, they're probably gonna say, oh, I hate you and this, that, and the other. Look, don't take it personal, because in the end, they will love you and they will respect you for holding them accountable for their actions, make sure that you drive it home, all the things that you believe in that will make them successful. Make sure you drive those points home with them every opportunity to have the conversation about how to be successful, and the grit and the guts and the work ethic that is necessary to do so. Make sure you instill that in them. Make sure it's a fire that burns deep within them, and it's one that you're gonna have to cultivate over and over and over. And when they slip and when they stumble, make sure that you correct that. Don't be harsh, but be hard on them. Be firm with your correction and keep them on the straight and narrow. Don't be too strict on them though, because when you're too strict, then they sneak around and they do things behind your back. You want to have an open dialogue, an open line of communication with your kids, so when they do have questions, they can come to you and they can ask. Men, don't be offended when your boys go to their mom to ask a question, or the girls go to the dad. Women, don't be offended at that. Kids develop bonds with usually, the opposite sex parent for some conversations, and for other conversations, you're only gonna go to mom if you're a girl, or you're gonna go to dad if you're a boy. That's just how it is. Don't get offended if your kids always go to mom and they want to talk about this, that, and the other. Mothers are sensitive. They're a lot of times they're the ones that get gone to when it comes to conversations that maybe are of a sensitive nature. But that being said, I want you guys to raise successful, healthy children who understand what it is to be strong, ambitious, dreamers, and really strivers for things that are great, awesome, and bigger than life. Make sure that whatever it is that your kids dream, that it's not small. Make sure it's bigger than life. Make sure it's bigger than what they can get next week, next year. Make sure it's huge. Make sure they're dreaming big. I think of it like this. Dream so big that God has to intervene in order for you to get to that dream. That's how big you should dream. If you dream too small, then guess what? Anybody can attain it. So, hopefully you got something out of this video. If you like the video, definitely like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Drop your comments down there. Let me know what you think about some of my comments in this video, as well as give me some of your comments, things that you've done with your children at work, things that didn't work. Share with me your experiences, and I'll hit you back in the comments as always. Make sure you double tap that notification bell so that you get all the updates from Man in the House going forward. But until next time, peace.